All right, today we're talking about something called the Great American Slowdown. Now, we've all heard stories about this huge nationwide migration, right? People packing up and moving clear across the country. But what if the real story is something completely different? Let's get into it.
I mean, it sure felt that way for a bit, didn't it? The pandemic hit, and suddenly it seemed like everyone was scrambling. We heard all these stories, people ditching the big cities for wide open spaces, moving hundreds, even thousands of miles away. But is that really the whole picture of what's going on today?
Well, it turns out, when you actually look at the data, this story is, well, it's a lot more complicated. A new analysis is showing that this dramatic coast-to-coast reshuffling we've all been talking about, it's actually slowed way, way down. The reality is something much quieter, but honestly, just as important. Okay, so let's start with the big picture. This is what some folks are calling the Great American Slowdown. And really, what it boils down to is that the numbers show a huge drop in how much we're all moving around the country. So there's this new report from Bank of America, and they looked at millions of customer accounts. And what they found was a really sharp drop in relocations since that peak right after the pandemic. It kind of feels like that urge to just pack up everything and start totally fresh somewhere new is fading. And hey, just so we're all on the same page here, when we talk about this, we're talking about domestic migration. All that means is people moving from one place to another inside the United States. And that distinction is actually super important, and we'll circle back to it in a bit. So here's the key takeaway from that. It seems we're all getting a little more reluctant to make those huge long-distance moves. The data actually shows that moves between states are dropping even faster than moves just across town or within the same state. People are either staying put, or at the very least, they're staying a lot closer. And that right there leads us to the central idea of this whole thing. We're staying closer to home. It's not that people have stopped moving altogether, not at all. It's just that a short move is the new big move. There's actually a quote from the report that just hits the nail on the head. It says, "The big story isn't a national reshuffle. It's people trading one nearby city for another that fits their budget and lifestyle a little better." See, it's all about these smaller, more strategic moves that just make more sense for their bank account and their lifestyle. So what's behind all this? Well, the reasons are actually pretty much what you'd expect. The biggest driver, number one with a bullet, is the search for more affordable housing. But it's also about staying close to family, not wanting to leave a familiar job market. And yeah, things like climate and lifestyle still matter a lot. It's really about optimizing your life, not completely reinventing. Okay, so if people are sticking to their regions, where exactly are they headed? Let's take a look at some of America's new, more localized hotspots. And you might be surprised by this one. The Midwest is actually seeing some serious growth. Yep, cities like Indianapolis and Columbus are pulling in new residents. And it's for two big reasons. Lower housing costs, for sure, but also big new projects, like all these data centers being built that are bringing in jobs. Let's take Austin, for instance. It's always a top destination, right? But check this out. A full 25% of its new residents aren't coming from California or New York. Nope, they're moving from other big cities right there in Texas. We're talking Houston, Dallas. This is a perfect example of that regional shuffle in action. And you see a really similar story with Denver. It's acting like this major regional hub. Get this, a whopping 80% of its new residents are coming from other states in the West and the South. These are folks who want that mountain lifestyle, but they're looking for an alternative to those super expensive coastal cities they might be coming from. Now, look at Philadelphia. It's another city that's really gaining people. And you can see exactly why right here. More than half of its new residents are coming from right there in the region. And a huge chunk of that, a full 25%, are coming straight from New York City. You can bet they're looking for more affordable housing that's still just a train ride away. But of course, if some cities are gaining, that means other cities have to be losing people. So let's flip the coin over and look at the other side of this so-called big city exodus. So when you just look at the raw numbers, the biggest outflows of people came from three major and, yeah, very expensive metro areas: Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. Probably not a huge shock to anyone. But where these people are going, now that's the interesting part. First up, let's talk about the LA shuffle. When people pack up and leave Los Angeles, they're not all heading for the Midwest or the East Coast. Not at all. Most of them are actually staying right there in the West. They're just moving to other regional hubs like Las Vegas or Phoenix. They're basically just trading one Sunbelt city for another, slightly more affordable one. And it's pretty much the exact same pattern with the New York shuffle. People are leaving the five boroughs, for sure, but a lot of them aren't going very far. They're ending up in other East Coast cities, just like we saw with Philly, or they're heading down to the South. In other words, they're staying on the same side of the country. And last up, we've got the Miami Shuffle. Now, even though Miami itself saw a drop in population, a ton of those people didn't even leave Florida. They just moved to other parts of the state or maybe the broader South. And once again, this just hammers home that powerful trend. It's regional migration, not national migration. So, what does all this mean? What's the big takeaway here? Well, this trend is quietly but very significantly reshaping the population map of America. Let's talk about what that really means. Look, if you remember just one thing from all this, make it this. Americans are not scattering to the four corners of the country. Instead, they're just shuffling. They're shuffling around within their own regions. And the number one thing driving that shuffle is the cost of living. And remember that important point I mentioned earlier? Here it is. This Bank of America data only looks at domestic moves, people moving within the U.S. It doesn't include international migration at all. And that's a whole other story that has a massive impact on population trends, especially in those big coastal cities. So why should you care about any of this? Because this quiet regional shuffle has some pretty loud consequences. I'm talking about things that directly affect the price of your home, the traffic on your commute, the demand for schools and hospitals, and yeah, ultimately the entire economic future of the places we all call home. What this really shows is that the map of America isn't being redrawn with these big, bold, dramatic lines. It's happening with thousands of tiny, subtle shifts, city by city, region by region. And it kind of leaves all of us with a pretty big question to think about, right? As this map keeps changing, where will we call home next?